This is More Than Work, the podcast reminding you that your self-worth is made up of more than your job title. Each week, I'll talk to a guest about how they discovered that for themselves. You'll hear about what they did, what they're doing, and who they are. I'm your host, Rabia. I work in IT, perform stand-up comedy, write, volunteer, and, of course, podcast. Thank you for listening. Here we go. Hello, and welcome back to More Than Work this week. This is episode 3 of season 6, and I'm glad you're here. If you're listening on the day it drops or another day, this is a really important episode. I recorded it actually back in March. It's just taken a while to get it up, but it's with Martin Henson of the BMEN Foundation. BMEN, you'll hear about, is an organization that basically works with Black men on issues that affect Black men. It came out of the MeToo movement, and I'll leave it for Martin, the founder, to tell you why. But to me, this conversation is one of those ones that I was hoping to be able to have on this podcast, because I talked to someone who was a Black Lives Matter activist. Now he has this foundation, and it's very inclusive as far as gender identity and as far as sexuality. And that really impressed me. And it's Pride Month, so I think it's a great time for this episode to air. We're also just coming off of Juneteenth, and Martin talks a lot about his work dealing with race issues. We had kind of a hard conversation at one point because I asked him what I could do as an ally. And that's the one question you're really not supposed to ask the people who you want to be an ally to, but he gave me a great answer. And I really asked it so that other people could hear the answer. And I just appreciate the graciousness with which Martin received my questions and received me. What I want you to get out of this is just really to learn how to be an ally to those who you want to be an ally to. And that could include yourself. I think recently I found out more about how to better do that for myself and figure out where I fit in. These issues that some people deal with and these causes they fight for, whether they're for themselves too or just for others, they can take a toll. And Martin had some great feedback on what he does to find balance and what he does to have it not take too much out of him. I work with the MS Society a lot. Sometimes that takes a toll. Sometimes that's difficult because I have multiple sclerosis. And though I feel very lucky in my path of the disease, I also feel like when I do certain work in that area, it's difficult. For other people like Martin, it's around race and issues around being Black in America and even in the world. And for you, it might be something else. But I hope that you really enjoy this chat with Martin, that you learn something. Let me know what you learn if you want. Let me know your feedback. And again, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening. Have a great day or night, or I guess it'd be one of those where you are. And don't forget to leave a review and rating or subscribe if you want. Thank you so much. Welcome back to More Than Work, everyone. My guest this week is Martin Henson. He's executive director of the organization BMEN, which we're going to get into what that is and what he does. Thanks for being a guest.
Thanks for having me. I love talking about what I do in as many ways as I can, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too, definitely. So where am I talking to you from right now?
I'm in Boston right now.
Is that where you're normally based?
I'm normally based here. I'm also from Arkansas. Been in 7 years. Doesn't make me a Bostonian. No. Let you know. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very specific about who's actually a Bostonian, I think there.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Let's first talk about just what is the BMEN Foundation and about what that work is that they do as an organization.
Yeah, BMEN Foundation stands for Black Male Engagement Network, and it's an organization that's created for Black men to work on issues specific to Black men. We do all this in an inclusive way, making sure that we have all Black men, Black, straight, queer, trans, involved in how we advocate, and we do a variety of things, including a monthly meeting. We do a lot of advocacy, both digitally and in community around the issues that are specific to Black men and how to talk about it in different ways. We do programming. We've done some COVID relief. We've done some work around sexual harm. And we're really focused on humanizing Black men, creating more support spaces for them, with the understanding that once we do that, we can create better, stronger communities. So that's BMEN in a bottle for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and how did you come to decide to start that organization?
Yeah, there's a few different paths. I think they all align in different ways. I'm a person who processes things later. Like something can happen and I'll move and react in ways that are trying to adjust to that. But I'm not a person who immediately knows, hey, I'm gonna do this in this way and it's gonna happen just like that. So BMEN originally started in response to MeToo and just me looking around and just seeing how men in general were responding to what was going on. And I wanted to do something. And then I was like, okay, men of color have a different reality. Then I was like, black men have a really different reality. Then I started talking to black men about it. Oh, black men need space to process all of these things. Because we can't just talk about black men in a way that just assumes that they're inherently predatory. The conversation around the sexual harm is expansive. So then you have spaces just for black men to process. And from there, you do all the things you have to do organizationally to make a thing occur. And now you have BMEN Foundation that's been around for 4 years.
And I guess with the response to MeToo, I mean, I think of MeToo a lot of times in a very myopic way of women's experiences with men. But I do know that people can be sexually assaulted if they're not women. And it's not always assault anyway. It's other microaggressions and behaviors towards women was what I was thinking of. But how did it manifest itself looking at it from the perspective of black men? Was it partly processing it like, I'm not that kind of guy and I don't do that kind of stuff, but also I've had this experience?
I actually really have strong feelings about that approach that men tend to have, because largely I feel like it's not helpful to think about it that way. But we, as a guy, we kind of make our steps to understand that, moving from a more defensive space. When I started to think about the things that were happening, it was the realization that Me Too was largely gender specific, as in focused on women or people who are perceived as women. And I was like, well, how do we talk about this when it happens for men? And I realized that men had a whole different paradigm, or the world has a different paradigm for how we look at men being victims. And with that is more different when you think about black men being victims and the victimization that black men have had to exist under. So the language of support and even victimization that was coming from Me Too didn't translate over to men. And although men could, in theory, respond in the same way, but they would not be responded to in the same way. It just all of that kind of said, well, we need something specific for black men to be human, to be vulnerable, to think about themselves in different ways and navigate consent, not just from a way of, again, as a perpetrator, because it gets into racialized framings of black men when you start to do that, but all of the ways that we engage this. So I moved, and the people who were creating it with me moved from the space that was a specific reaction to sexual harm to a more holistic approach to black men that included and acknowledged the reality that we also have that too. So just more expansive, and then focus on black men specifically.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, I mean, just a lot of times what you hear in media or like in entertainment and stuff is it's almost like trivialized when men are harassed in a certain way, especially if it's by a woman. Then it's like, oh, then they make jokes about the women kind of thing and jokes about the man, but it could be traumatic for the guy, and it might not be like necessarily physically as scary in a way if someone's smaller than you, but it's really harmful, right? If women are acting that way, and then you get outside of the whole women and men thing and just expand to same sex or same, I guess, gender doing things and whatever, or people being young and things like that. And so I can see where there's shame created for men that's different than women too, because it's almost like it's almost accepted that women, it's like 1 in how many now have experienced some form of sexual harassment or assault anyway. So it's kind of accepted that women will say that it's happened to them because everyone knows it does. But for men, it doesn't seem as like accepted socially, I guess.
Yeah, not at all. And then when you start to talk about men as victims, you get very curious reactions. The ones that I just really didn't expect, largely that men are trying to take space away from women, or they don't really care. It's just they're just arguing. And I think what's happening for people who is that they're, let's say for a lot of women, they're given a space to be seen and heard and understood within their experience. And when you've never had a conversation around men experiencing these things too, it can be difficult for folks to lean into that and see where we're more alike than different, because so much of, let's say for women, their harm might be originating with men. So just finding that specific way that men can really speak with each other and affirm each other's experience has been so much of what I do. And then the stigma and shame that encompasses all of these things that impact us, not just sexual harm. Those are things that interest me. And BMEN as an organization is really working to get rid of that, because there's so many negative outcomes that come from having to live with that.
Well, and you mentioned too that it's inclusive as far as gender and sexuality, and it's a space for queer men or for transgender. And I know one thing just in the movement I'm familiar with, right, in feminism, there's this whole idea that it's not as intersectional as it should be, and people are excluded based on, gender assignment at birth and things like that. And so that's been a big criticism of the women's movement for a long time, actually, and that it's excluded people of color, right? I mean, that's a big one. Like, there's white feminists who are very specific and not inclusive, and then or that it's been seen that way, and then there's work to be more inclusive, at least by people who acknowledge it. And so, how did you in your organization, did you immediately decide you were going to be inclusive, or was that something you came to realize needed to happen over time?
I think I immediately knew I wanted to be inclusive. In my network of people who were supportive, a lot of Black queer men that I was just talking to about what was happening and how, and they were putting me onto the fact that when we talk about things with Black men, there's this kind of unspoken rule that we're not really talking about men who are gay. We're looking at them in this very heteronormative framework. And I try to lean away from the heavy terms that have a lot of academia that come with them, because the average person isn't thinking like that. But that's, pretty much what the framing was. We don't realize that we do that. And they were just kind of putting me onto this. So from there, I was like, all right, well, we need to actually have a space that's intentionally inclusive. One of the side effects is that when I go into other spaces and I say, hey, BMEN, is intentionally inclusive to all men, straight, queer, trans, the people look at it like, oh, well, this group just works for gay men. And because it's almost like to even acknowledge it in a specific way means that it must, these are all things that you have to deal with when you're just like, it seems like common sense.
Right.
But it's not necessarily.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I've done some studying more recently on like policy creation, and looking at who you include in policies and who benefits from them and things like that. And it's been a thing that I've realized is if you don't intentionally include people, then you could be excluding them. Then if the perception becomes that because you included them, it's only for them, it's kind of a weird thing. And
yes.
So one thing I learned in a leadership course is sometimes people don't want to accept change because they feel like something's being taken from them.
Yeah. And
it's almost like the people who fall under the heteronormative place, and I don't really talk about that much on this podcast either, but just it is how our biases are formed, because it is how things became cultural norms. And so it's like people do feel like something's being taken from them, even though your organization didn't even exist, but somehow now it's not for them and someone else is coming and taking it. And it's a weird thing where they don't see inclusivity and having more voices as actually benefiting everyone.
Yeah, and I value that. And I'm always trying to push in ways that I'm not normally or most likely to be acclimated toward. So, for example, I'm a straight man. I don't know what gay men go through intuitively. I have to build these spaces that allow me to hear that and see that and think about it. Same is true for Black trans men. But when you get into the discussions around it, I think sometimes I end up feeling like I'm caught in the middle of how people would like to perceive it, because in very progressive spaces or very liberal, activist, radical, whatever you want to call it, they want the language to come with the advocacy. And I'm like, if I'm talking to them around being just regular guys who don't move in these spaces or use this language around how to be inclusive to gay men, I'm not going to be like, well, we have to unpack the heteronormative assumptions of the ways that we navigate in life and how it marginal. I'm not going to talk like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm going to say, hey, hey, folks is gay. You think you got 20 dudes in here? You think nobody's gay? So we're going to just leave this person out because, that you have to kind of be almost more blunt in certain ways. Mm-hmm. But that's what it takes to pull people in. What I say and what keeps me grounded is that most people, if you think about where they are in terms of change or feeling strongly about ideas, most people don't care. Mm-hmm. And then you have the people who are on the extremes who care a lot, and people who are actually against it. So my job is to move people a little bit to a place where they're more supportive, not to make them move like me,
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, you have to meet people where they are. And I think we've lost sight of that a lot in general as a society. I mean, I'm definitely more liberal, and I definitely think that language matters and what we say matters and stuff. And so I do stand-up comedy, and I could probably write very offensive jokes just because I'll just say, yeah, I probably have offensive thoughts. I know a lot of people do. I don't think we all operate 100% in this great space all the time. But it's I choose not to do that, right? I choose to use language I think is acceptable and I'm okay saying, and I'm okay someone calling me out on, But I do think it's funny how there's no space for learning sometimes, and there needs to be. And so the people you're talking about, or even if I talk to my family and stuff about things, and maybe I've learned and I spent time with people, so I've understood a problem more, and I understand my role in trying to help or staying away because it's not helpful if I'm trying to help. Mm-hmm. But I need to talk to them in a way that they're going to be able to listen and process. And if I just say some super academic thing or whatever, they might not process it, and then we've gotten nowhere. It's almost like just making them feel stupid and talking down to them instead of talking to them where they are. So it makes sense what you're doing, in other words.
Yeah, I like it. I meet a ton of dope people. I'm constantly learning, so I enjoy it.
Yeah. So you mentioned how the organization started out, but you're basically an activist, really. That's one word to describe you, I think. But before that, you were working as a counselor. So can you talk a little bit about the work you had started doing and then how you evolved into pivoting to activism? And they're probably related anyway, I imagine.
Yeah, I would say they're largely the same, depending on, how you unpack it and approach it. One of my friends was telling me that I should tell people more that I'm a mental health professional, because technically I'm that. I build an organization that can respond by building advocacy and support networks. So I have a master's in counseling, was doing that. Doing that meaning that I was providing therapy and support and doing different coordinations. I worked in a few different jobs, methadone clinic, group home, so on and so forth. So I always knew that I enjoyed helping people and supporting them navigate from one space in their life to another. The piece with being a very traditional counselor is that you're in office doing therapy with people, probably 5 to 6 hours a day, doing paperwork the rest of that time. And seeing that, and then the networks of being a therapist and dealing with insurance and dealing with the atmosphere in psychology, which is largely guided by the white philosophy and psychological theories, and having an outlook that's very specific and focused on Black people, people of color, and issues that they navigate in ways that other folks don't deal with. I just felt like, okay, I need to have my own. Why sit up here and wrestle with these folks to be more inclusive when I can just create something? So from there, I was already doing activism. I did a lot of stuff with Black Lives Matter, did a lot of teaching and speaking and to the same vein of the things that I do now. And I was like, all right, well, if I can just build my own organization to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know anything about how to do it. It's a whole process. So basically a business, which you have to know how to manage. But that's in the middle of all the things I was doing, that was just another expression of my values to move like this.
Yeah. So do you do any counseling anymore on the professional side, or it's completely
no, we don't do that anymore. But I can always consult because, of course I went to school for it. It helps in ways where you can look and pick apart research and really be able to identify how what I'm doing works and what makes it impactful, as opposed to kind of moving off my own energy and charisma. Like, I know exactly what makes this important, and I know how the research trends. I know how they talk about Black men in a way that I don't think someone who came from a different field from counseling or social work would be able to do.
Yeah, because you have all the background and you're coming at it with the thought of, there's a lot of empathy involved, I'm sure, and removing your personal experience and more having empathy for what others are doing or have experienced.
Yeah.
So with BMEN, is it just local to Boston, or is it an organization people can interact with from anywhere?
People can interact with it from anywhere. Due to COVID, we had to create a digital format for our support spaces and meetings. So any physical activities are focused in the greater Boston area. So when we do the Bridging the Gap program event, which is something where we partner with the Transgender Emergency Fund, it's another organization who bring Black straight men, trans women of color together to talk about how we exist and overlap in our lives, the stigma that we go through, so we can create better outcomes for both, with the big focus on creating better outcomes for trans women of color. That will have to be in person because that's where we are. But the digital stuff can happen from anywhere.
Cool. No, that's great. And is most of the focus on the MeToo aspect still, or did it expand to just like generalized experiences and different subjects?
Oh, it just expanded. So what the MeToo part became was us doing sexual harm workshops that we did a year or two ago, and holding that as something that's in our bag, or something that we can do, thinking about consent, thinking about men's approach to their bodies as well as to the people around them. So that's still there, but like you said, it just expanded.
Cool. And as far as your activism and your work with Black Lives Matter, I assume you're still doing that.
Oh, no, not anymore.
No, not at all.
Fired from that piece, but I did it for a good period of time. It was about 6 years.
Okay.
Of just really learning what bringing something up from the ground looks like. I used to go out and talk to these groups of people around what Black Lives Matter meant, how it was relevant to issues at the time, how we think about incarceration and police brutality, and my more recent work has kind of transitioned into restorative justice. So all of my stuff kind of grows outward. One part may end in my connection to on the ground work and that form of activism, but I've picked up the restorative justice piece. I've picked up BMEN Foundation. I picked up the advocacy and the constant educational stuff that I'm doing.
Can you talk a little bit about restorative justice and what that means, basically, just for listeners to hear from someone who is working in it versus me explaining it now and then asking you to agree?
For sure. I came across it there was a package of ideas that came in the Black Lives Matter movement against police brutality, whatever synonymous frame that you have for how we started to think about our relationships to police and police brutality after the death of Trayvon Martin that happened about 10 years ago.
Which is crazy. It's that long ago now.
It's insane. Restorative justice was one of those ideas in kind of this grouping of thoughts that we had around how to be different. And basically what it means is creating alternative responses to harm that don't lean on punishment. So you're restoring people's relationship to community as opposed to ostracizing them or punishing them. And there's the variety of things that come with that. that can be considered restorative, or within the realm of restorative justice. A lot of restorative justice is derived from indigenous groups, natural ways of orienting themselves toward holding community and responding after harm. So I've done a good bit of work in that. Sitting in circle, like literally in a circle of people, is one of those ways to talk about and build community, as well as respond to things that are harmful. So there's things that happen within the judicial system that also can be considered restorative justice, where people who have done some level of criminal offense are able to meet with the victims of their crime. And sometimes it can impact sentencing. Sometimes it doesn't. But we're seeing more opportunities to think about how we navigate the prison industrial complex that's different from what we were doing before, as we've seen that's been so harmful to Black people of color.
Yeah, well, and yeah, just the punishments are longer often.
Yeah.
You get sent to different facilities, things like that. So when you look at your overall what you've been doing, and you were doing the counseling, activism, which you're still doing but in a different way, and BMEN, and you did say like it reflects your values. So it seems like your work has always reflected your values. Was that something that, like, did you get into counseling because you wanted to help people? I mean, you had the whole time to think about during college and grad school and stuff like that. So how did you become a values-centered person, I guess?
The church. I grew up in a church. I don't know if you had the experience, but for the folks who have, when I went to a private school. That was a Christian private school. I would be with my grandmother. Don't let it be a revival in town. We going to church every day. Then you're on the usher board. You speak in Easter Sunday. You just have all of these things that are boiled into you about how to value people and treat folks well, and wanting to be in a very Baptist sort of way, kind of the light that shines, so people can be attracted to the work that you do. So that, I think I just came up with that. My dad was a pastor. It was always around, and that level of community and centering what people need, primarily through kind of a spiritual way. But I think I took that into my everyday life. And then I grew up in community centers. My mom had me in community centers, community programs all the time. And she runs one now and has been involved in running it since as long as I can remember. And then my dad being a pastor, my stepdad teaching me all these things about how to be in service. My stepdad used to make me read Black history books when I was little and write a report. I hated it at the time. I tell him how appreciative I am of him, because all of these things made me like, oh, we have to treat people well. We have to treat people better, because all of that history is something that I carry with me so much now, and that value for people that look like me. And I remember after Black History Month, there's a standard stack of facts they give you in Black History Month.
Yeah. Yes.
I always knew more, and I always just thought about it differently. All of these things just put me in this particular box to where my values are always in the front of how I want to be. I want to wake up when I'm 65, 70 and be like, I did everything I wanted to do. I don't have any regrets around what I could have offered the world. That's what I want to be. And I feel like I am.
Yeah, that's really great. And it's interesting with the church. I mean, I have various experiences with religion that some aren't great. I mean, religion's also used as a weapon in the U.S., for sure. We have the whole separation of church and state. However, when you look at the church, it's really the Christian right wing, has this huge stake in the government and in law. And we're seeing it now in the Don't Say Gay bill. And we're seeing it, all the time. I don't want to get into that because I'll take away from what your message is today. So it's a weird thing, how it's worked out in the U.S., but then the religion you're talking about and the church you're talking about is very different, because it's very service-based and it's more in line with what the Bible, I would say, is teaching. I mean, if I was going to say, like, I believe in some part of it, it would be that part, not this other stuff,
If I'm honest, sometimes it's not different. I still, the South is the South. I don't know what you know about the Bible Belt, but it can be intense down there. And for me to have my value set and the way that I grew up and all of my beliefs to come together, there are contradictions that I had to navigate. There are spaces that I know because I've done so much work and thought that I can navigate, and I can start having those dialogues. So even with the don't say gay stuff, I'm thinking in my mind, all right, as a dude that does this work and does this level of advocacy, straight black guy, I know that there's an ear that will listen to me in a way that won't listen to the other folks. So how do I use that? Because I think about it like, what would how would my BMEN's pitch be in that place? Because it would have to be different.
Right.
It would have to be different, but the goal is to end up at the same point. The Christian radical right is something that black people have been dealing with since we've gotten here. Since they brought us over on ships and tried to Christianize us, and then changed it just so that if you were baptized, that you were still considered a slave, because being a baptized Christian, it was all of these ways that religion was used to codify the institution of slavery. And it still happens as it relates to racism. So even in my advocacy, I don't lead headfirst in the religious sector, but I know from my history and what I've been through, and I know I come from that, I got to deal with those contradictions too. And the work that I'm doing is that much more important.
Yeah. It's interesting, and it's interesting too. Like your faith is kind of something that provided you with the service mindset and stuff, but then also has led you to have to serve in a way. So
yeah, because I'm always like, I'd be like, I don't know, we have the same religion, technically, but I don't know who they praying to, because the way they moving is real different. Because I've had a lot of really hard conversations with people who when you come from the church, because there can be a lot of stuff that can be really harmful that happen. So that's why I say, because I come from that space, I know how people think. I got to be in there doing the work to deal with that stuff, so other folks ain't got to deal with it. That's my theory on being an ally, being an accomplice, is that I got you on this. If you got me on that, I got you on this.
Yeah. Well, and allyship is another thing that I found that there has to be care taken with it, because you can do harm. Like someone like me, I've learned a lot in the last couple of years, and especially, with the death of George Floyd, that was the big moment for a lot of people, even though you would say, well, yeah, and I've been dealing with this forever. But then, and I would say I was trying to be an ally before, but then I became much more aware of what that meant, and much more aware of experience, because seeing that and knowing if that person looked like me or resembled me or a family member or something, it would have been a lot different experience than what I went through with watching it and the emotions and stuff. And so one thing though that I learned was, like, don't ask people what the problem is. Like, don't ask them to tell you why it's a problem. Learn more about the experience. But I do think that there is a need to ask questions sometimes. But how do you feel about that? Like, what, if I can just ask something that's probably like an annoying question, but like, what should people do who want to be better allies at this point? Like, because, there's the whole idea, like, companies look for Black History Month, they'll promote stuff, but then have a sale or some weird, like, that's not what it's about. Like, no one's worried you didn't get 20% off on shoes. That's not the problem, Or, people will post memes, or like when the Black Lives Matter, the blackout on social media, and then everyone put a black square. So then it was like, well, now you're taking up space somewhere else. So just from your perspective, if you were going to tell someone like me how to, like, what's helpful or harmful, if you don't mind, what would you say?
I would always say that just keep digging within the question. So if somebody's like, well, what can I do to be a better ally? Ally to what? In what way? What is it that's bothering you? What is it that you want to do? So taking out all of the work from me to have to process that, and then be like, all right, well, where do you see yourself being the most purposeful? Or what is your understanding of this problem to this moment? I've done a lot of work. I'm not, I used to be real different, and I just acknowledge that. And I think also within our how we think about allyship and being supportive to people. It's okay to not have always been where you are now. I think sometimes people are afraid of that. But as it relates to the Don't Say Gay bill, maybe me from 10 years ago might have asked somebody, yay, what they thought about it. What do you think about this? Give me the summary of your experience reacting to this thing that is obviously terrible for you. The me now, I'll go into it, read it. There's podcasts everywhere. We're on one now.
Yeah.
You get somebody that really boils it down and summarizes it. And then I can find a direct spot of intervention. So then my question becomes, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing to address this. What do you think? Now it's just far more concise around my intent, and an action plan has already been developed. Now, if it's somebody who's wanting to understand it better and they're not even at that point, then I'd kind of keep it more general, because I think there's a group or a segment, let's say if it relates to white and black issues, a segment of white people that are just like, just tell me what to do, I'll do whatever. I'm so bad.
Yeah.
And tell me I'm a bad person. It's just like it gets, it can get weird. But just having discussions around distinctions and differences, I think that's what's a powerful intervention. Even just the support spaces that we do for Black men, just bringing people together to talk about these things. That's a big thing. Just bring people together to talk about this issue and just process it. That may be with, let's say, for white people, that may begin with white folks. If there's a question that you're kind of all reacting to, sit in a space where you can honestly give your opinion to somebody in a way that's not going to hurt the group that you're trying to navigate with. And that might actually be your work, just to give people space to process it. But it can be a lot of things. As it relates to BMEN, I would say, I've always been like, donate, support our stuff, share our stuff on social media, let people know about the advocacy that we do, and the framings and the perspectives of Black men that we have in America, specifically, and to some degree globally, and how harmful they can be, because there's people out there doing this work, and there's a lot of connections that can be made. But yeah, so hopefully, I know I said a lot, so hopefully I answered.
No, that's great. And I think it's good just to be able to ask the question of someone who's gone through the experience of interacting with someone who's maybe said things, and also showing that you've evolved. I think that's important too, because I do think there is a lot of guilt that people feel, but my guilt, if it's mine, my guilt is not your burden. Like, that's not the additional burden you need to take on now, because I was maybe not doing something in the past, or I had some thoughts in the past, or whatever. And that's what I think is important just in general, just in thinking about it right now, is like, don't put your guilt on the people who you're trying to help, because that's not helpful to them. That's kind of some kind of misplaced way of doing things. But yeah, donate. Like, maybe if you feel guilty, donate, but don't tell them you donated because you're guilty. I don't know.
Yeah. Another example, I was talking to a friend of mine from back in college around how things were, and we were talking about how kind of homophobic the atmosphere was, and telling me about how things impacted him with that atmosphere. And I wanted to sit in my own guilt about like who I was then and how I might have thought about it. I think I was still progressive and thoughtful, but it wasn't like this. And I probably thought or said or did things that are harmful. But, there was an impulse to want to be like, man, I feel so bad. Like, to lean into that. And I think just acknowledging it, taking time to process that, and then moving into what you can do now, as opposed to kind of really sitting into these guilt-laden spaces where there's some spaces that people just do the thing. Like, I'm terrible. I can't do that. I hate those conversations, and people will try to have them with me. There's somebody else's ministry, is not mine. So yeah.
Well, so one thing, just knowing, for example, for me, like when I do some nonprofit work, some of it's really personally exposing for me, because I'll be talking about my experience with different things. I do work with a couple of organizations around issues that are, have affected me. And I know that can get emotionally taxing and difficult. And if I was doing it every day, I think it'd be hard. So how do you work on setting up boundaries for yourself so you can still enjoy your life, even though you're kind of dealing with really heavy things all the time?
Yeah, I've said this before. When you're taking on more things that have an emotional tax on you or an intellectual tax on you, even a spiritual tax on you, you have to be more vigorous in the way that you utilize your self-care. You just have to be. One of those things is time. You can't just react to things as they're happening, or you'll be doing stuff all the time, working all the time. So what are your time blocks that you can devote to this thing? That's one way. Another way is having a therapist. I've had one throughout my life, very different periods. Get you one. Get you a group that you rock with. I think BMEN support groups are also therapeutic for me. A place where you can let off the steam of the work that you have to do. I make sure I make more time for myself. There's a period of time where I didn't really take, aside from going to see my daughter in Arkansas, I didn't really take vacation. I was just getting it every day. Now, if I don't do this, then the world is going to fundamentally change in a way that's irreparable. But I think we forget we're not the first people that are going to care and take on the healing and structural change work that we know needs to happen, and we're not going to be the last. It fall apart. But it doesn't mean that the work that we do isn't unique and purposeful, but for us to continue to do it in a way that preserves our humanity, you have to have boundaries, you have to have structures that allow you to flex your emotional range too. Some days you're angry, some days you want to cry, some days you're happy, some things are surprising you. And for me, when I'm not flexing that well enough, my range of emotion shrinks. It becomes the range that is necessary to complete whatever task that I'm doing. And so that lets me know, okay, you need to go do some other stuff if this is happening.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. It's good to just hear about that and what's been helpful for you. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah. All right. Well, I know you just said a lot that could be construed as advice, so you can just say you want to bypass this question, but I just like to ask people, is there any advice or mantra you like to share, or maybe some thought you just like to leave people with when you do interviews or talks or anything?
I think there's a whole bunch of mantras that I move and live by. And one of those is, this moment will never happen again. The right now that you have. Me and you talking. You cannot replicate it. It's impossible. So thinking about your life in that way, your everyday and who you want to be, waiting, you can't guarantee that you're going to have another opportunity to be who you always wanted to be. So just do it now,
Yeah. Great. Yeah. No, I love that. And that's something that on this podcast I try to get out. So that's awesome. All right. So now I have a set of questions called the Fun Five. They're just kind of light. So the first one is, what's the oldest t-shirt you have and still wear?
I got a shirt that has Arkansas on it. It's a great shirt. Arkansas, it's kind of faded. There's a few holes in it. I wear it when I work out. It makes me look really muscular.
Yeah.
I probably had this shirt for maybe 15 years, but I'm gonna hold on at least till I get another shirt that's almost the same thing. So
yeah, that's good for working out, for flexing
the
gym.
You look big. You want to have a good pump in a super tight shirt. That's kind of how it goes. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. Cool. And if every day was Groundhog's Day, like it seemed for a while, because we were just having the same kind of repetition, especially when we're in our lockdowns everywhere, what song would you have your alarm clock set to play every morning?
There's a few, because I listen to music all the time. But if I had to hear one song over and over again, I feel like it would have to be something from Michael Jackson. It had to be some Michael Jackson. Maybe Remember the Time. Yeah, I would go and Remember the Time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it starts off it has cool sounds in it and stuff. Yeah. All right, cool. So Remember the Time. And then coffee or tea or neither?
Neither. Actually, in the morning, some days I'll drink raw eggs. Just
really?
Protein. Yeah. It's disgusting, but I'll do that. I've done it for years and years and years. So I wouldn't. I don't do any caffeine generally, unless there's
good.
significant going on.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, that's, raw eggs is the first time I've heard that answer, but that's good. It's good I can be surprised sometimes, All right, and then can you think of a time that you laughed hard, you cried, or just something that cracks you up when you think of it that just makes you happy and laugh?
So I love laughing because that's my way of having balance. So people either say I'm either serious or sarcastic. There's no real in between. There's this video. I don't know what. So insane. They recreated the sound of a mummy, and it's like an interview where they're on, I want to say ABC, NBC, and they're talking about the process, and they recreate what the sound is, and it's just like something like that. But people have dubbed over it and put really ridiculous sounds in the place of what the sound of the mummy would be. And every time I think of it, I laugh because it's just so absurd,
ridiculous.
Yeah,
yeah. It sounds good.
Yes.
All right, and then who inspires you right now?
Me. You have to forgive me if it sounds arrogant, but I just been through so much, and the work to constantly be on the edge of things that you don't know and trying to get better at. That's a conscious struggle every day, because I could just find a thing and just do that, and that could be my thing. But part of working around stigma and talking about these unconventional topics is that I have to lean into the unknown always. If you imagine somebody going through the jungle and they're there's a path, and then it's I want to do a new path, and he's just whacking, weeds and stuff. I feel like that's me all the time, and having to be comfortable in that is a whole process. But to be able to kind of look in the mirror and see who I've become, and know that I'm the culmination of all of these people and friends and family, and even my child that have just poured into me, and I'm still here. I'm inspired by still being here. I'm inspired by who I see in the mirror every day.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's arrogant. It sounds at first if you go, oh well, me, but then you hear why, and I think it's great. So. You should be. I think you're great. So for what it's worth, I'm inspired by what you're doing. All right, Martin. So if people want to find you and find your organization, where do you want them to go online? And of course, I'll have it in the show notes too.
Yeah, you can check out our organization at BMENFoundation.org. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn at BMEN. To see more about the work that I'm doing as well, you can check out martinhspeaks.com. So yeah, I'm out here doing this work, and you'll see me doing more of it as time goes on.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It was really great to learn about what you do and the really important work you're doing. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks for listening. You can learn more about the guest and what was talked about in the show notes. Joe Maffia created the music you're listening to. You can find him on Spotify at Joe, Maffia. Rob Metke does all the design, for which I am so grateful. You can find him online by searching Rob, Metke. Please leave a review if you like the show, and get in touch if you have feedback or guest ideas. The pod is on all the social channels at More Than Work Pod or at Rabia Comedy on TikTok, and the website is morethanworkpod.com. While being kind to others, don't forget to be kind to yourself.